Black CEO denied in first-class orders or indefinite date by air company. In 10 minutes, the clock was 9:30 p.m. when Samuel entered the airline's VIP lounge, tired after an exhausting week of meetings in London. The job was done. He spent the most time peeling his beard, and he breathed his last breath. My flight to New York was late, but it didn't matter. With the experience I have, I was accustomed to these counter-tempos. What he never imagined was that simple delay would trigger something that would change his life with the airline company irreversibly. Samuel Westbrook, CEO of one of the country's two largest technology conglomerates, always traveled in first class. He was accustomed to the luxury, the privacy, and the comfort that the position provided. Even being a renowned businessman, what mattered most to Samuel was not status, but how he dealt with adversities. He knew that the world would not be easy for him, a black man in front of a corporation of bilhões. I always have resistance. Ele lidava com isso. When the warning was finally received, Samuel got up and continued in the direction of the boarding port. The line was quiet. That world-class airport seemed to be the perfect place to relax, but your perception began to change when you went to the airline's balcony. An attendant, a woman with blue eyes, a dream for him with a protocol smile. "Senhor, posso ajudá-lo?" "Sim, please," Samuel replied. "I have a reserved seat in the first class, named Samuel Westbrook." He quickly entered the computer, and after a few seconds raised his eyes. "Excuse me, senor. There was a mistake in your ticket. The seat in the first class was allocated for another passage, Samuel Franziu a testa. But stay calm. You have a seat in the first class, confirmed by my assistant. Verify again, please." The attendant hesitated, his fingers lightly tapping on the computer fabric. "Please check me once more." While he was digital, Samuel observed the movement around him, noticing that other passengers were being attended to without problems. He felt the weight of hearing some people in his direction, but he forced himself not to react. He knew that this kind of thing happened in your businesses, but he always knew that, at least in the first class, he would not face problems. "Before we begin, I want to know where you are assisting. Please leave us comments in your city or country. I read all your comments and I love connecting with our communities around the world. Please take the opportunity to click the download button and activate the button to receive all the news. Enter 1 to give us comments. Your support is essential so that we can achieve more information that we urgently need." After a few minutes, a woman smelled him with an indifferent expression. "Senor Westbrook, we only have a seat available in the executive class. We can allocate it." Samuel olo for her without hiding the surprise and growing discomfort. "Are you telling me that, for some reason, my seat was given to another person, and are you offering me a seat in the executive class? I am the CEO of a large company. I traveled for years with your company, and this type of mistake never happened." The attendant remains firm, as if he were reading a script. "Senor, we are sorry for any confusion, but the executive class is the best we can offer at this moment. The first class is gone." Samuel didn't know what to say. I felt a storm surge forming, but it was also forced to be maintained or controlled. "Eu não vou aceitar isso. I want you to place me in the lower chair in the first class, or to warn me that I can speak directly about the matter." The attendant looked to the side, looking for some superior, and finally said, "I may call the manager to help you, but I must let you know that the company's rules are clear." "I don't need a manager," Samuel said, beginning to lose patience. "I need to know that it's meu por direito." I thought the barnacle was happening. It was not a mistake. It was something much bigger. He had already witnessed preconception before, but now it seemed to be different. He did not want to prove it, but the reality was clear to him. As one of 2 black CEOs in an industry dominated by white men, Samuel knew what was behind the attitude of the manager. It was racism, pure and simple. He breathed out, trying not to lose his composure. "Tell the manager that you will wait here until he finds me." It was a tense moment. He stood there in front of the balcony, watching the people around him. Some looked curious, others seemed not to notice the situation. But Samuel could not afford to ignore what was happening. He has to fight, not just for himself, but for all those who have already been silenced or ignored in circumstances like this. Minutes later, a man in a suit approached. The manager seemed uncomfortable, as if he were Subes, or that he was ready to happen. He extended his love to Samuel. "Senhor Westbrook, é prazer conhecê-lo. How can I help him?" "We don't have time for formalities," Samuel said, looking directly into the manager's eyes. "I have a seat reserved in the first class, but I was informed that it is chair. This is unacceptable. It is not just a passaggero qualquer. It is a customer who has been loyal to your company for years. I want to know why this happened." The manager looked panicked. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but the situation was caused by an error in seat allocation." "I don't see you with apologies," Samuel responded as he began to ferry. "You know very well that there is no error. This is racism disguised as an operational error." The manager seemed to want to rebuke, but he was hesitant. He knew that any wrong word could worsen the situation. Samuel could no longer see the panic on his face. He was no longer willing to negotiate. "I demand an immediate solution," Samuel said, his voice firm. "If we will not resolve this now, you will make this incident public. I can guarantee that it will not be bad for you." Nessie moment. He found something that I never expected. Picking up his cell phone, he discovered a number and, in a determined voice, he ordered, "Fetch a partnership with this airline company immediately, and moreover, I order that this company be dated for an indefinite period of time." He knew that his impact would be great, but Samuel had already made up his mind. He would not tolerate discrimination in any way. The tension was not palpable, Orfico manager pale, unable to respond. But Samuel was no longer there to apologize. He was there to show what would happen when someone disrespected him. The silence at the airport seemed heavy, as was heard around Samuel, laden with expectations. The manager is still trying to organize his thoughts, his eyes moving frantically between Samuel's cell phone and the CEO's determined expression. He knew that the situation was critical. Any false move could destroy not only the image of the airline company, but also affect the internal aviation market, especially since Samuel Westbrook was not just a famous businessman. He was responsible for investments in various sectors, including transportation and technology. The weight of the decision was in your hands. "Senor Westbrook, please don't face me," the manager Tentu said in a trembling voice. "You will resolve this situation immediately. If you wish, we can relocate a seat for first class now itself. There is no need to go to extreme measures." But Samuel didn't move. His eyes were fixed as managers, and his posture remained implacable. He knew exactly that he was in the game. "This is not about a seat in the first class," he said in a deep and controlled voice. "This is a principle. What you do not understand is that for someone like us, this type of error is not something isolated. This happens all the time, on different levels, in more subtle ways. This is not something you can do anymore." The manager knew that the negotiation was over. Samuel had made a clear and direct statement, and now he was a man with a cause. What seemed to be a simple quest for an executive class seat turned into something bigger. A fight against systemic racism. And the gravity did not pass unnoticed. Without more words, Samuel picked up his cell phone again, and with the calm of a man who had never known what to do, entered a message. It was for his assessoria, a simple command. "Fetch a partnership with company XYZ, immediate suspension of all agreements." In less than 10 minutes, the reaction was on the chain. As social networks began to agitate, the public reaction was both immediate and devastating. Within hours, the hashtag Fechea Compañía XYZ became one of the two most commented topics. Samuel wasn't just defending himself. He was creating a movement, something that everyone knew was ready to explode. As it is, on the airport balcony, the situation was ready to take even greater proportions. The manager desperately tried to contact superiors, but it seemed that the time was against him. "I have no idea what he's doing," he murmured, thinking to Samuel. But Samuel doesn't care more about empty things. "I know exactly what I'm doing," he replied coldly, "and if you really understand what's going on, you'll realize that the problem is nothing more than just a problem in any industry, or that you and your company have just made one more example of what's happening all the time, every day." As the manager tried to look for a solution, Samuel had already moved on to the next step. He knew that the consequences would be great. More than that, he knew that he needed something even stronger to change the mentality of the company and society. "Date everything. It's not just about me. It's about what this behavior represents," Samuel said, his voice firm. "He is nothing more than an isolated case." He knew the power he had, and now he wanted to show everyone the impact of a system that perpetuates such profound inequalities. At the same time, his office was on full alert. The legal team began to analyze all existing contracts between Samuel's company and the airline company. The scope of his order was immense. This would not just be an individual boycott, but a strategic offensive against a network of commercial agreements that could irreparably ruin the airline company's finances. And Samuel has power to ISO. 1 hour later, the news is already on all the days and news sites. CEO of a large corporation orders the date of an aviation giant after racism in attention, said one manchette. These images of Samuel, calm, more determined, will begin to spread on social networks. His followers were ecstatic, supporting his decision, celebrating the courage of someone who was not intimidated. But there are, of course, those who criticize, accusing them of exaggeration, of using their position of power in a destructive manner. The reaction was polarized, but Samuel knew that he couldn't care less about it. Not in the middle of the storm, one detail stood out. While the airline was in panic, Samuel began to negotiate with other companies, with a faceless, cynical smile. He knew that this would be an opportunity to open new doors. He was not just living. He was creating a new space, where he and others, as he could have the voice he deserved. But it was not just the companies that were affected. The movement was spreading. Many of us started to question something deeper than what Samuel was doing. It was not just a CEO facing an airline company. It was a response to a system that for decades had silenced and disrespected those who, like it, were different. Now, at the airline headquarters, directors are in panic. Negotiations with other partners were broken. Trust in their brand was ruined. More of a problem was what Samuel represented, a breaking of a norm that had never been challenged with such force before. They were in the presence of a man who was not afraid to risk everything for a reason. And so, for them, it was something much more perilous than any financial crisis. At the end of the night, Samuel finally settled down in a new flight, in another plane. He was not more suitable for New York, but for a crucial meeting somewhere else. The phone did not stop ringing. Lawyers, executives, friends, and confused people come to contact us. These messages were accumulating. But Samuel finally leaned back on the armchair and looked at Janella. He knew that his battle was just beginning, or that what he had done was more than simply taking an attitude against an airline company. He had started a movement that would echo in the coming decades. The power was with him, and now he would no longer be ignored. The impact of what Samuel had done was immediate and irreversible. In the following days, the news will not stop emerging. The world was obsessed with the black CEO who had challenged an aviation giant and caused an economic collapse that he had not expected. Samuel Westbrook was no longer just the CEO of a technology company. He will become a symbol of a new type of leadership, more audacious, more uncomfortable. The first reflections of the movement begin to unfold in a surprising way. The airline, which at the first moment attempted to minimize the scandal, saw its reputation rapidly deteriorate. Multinationals that have signed million-dollar contracts with companies are beginning to review their partnerships. Executives and investors, who were previously willing to ignore preconception, are now being confronted with reality. The social pressure was unsustainable. Samuel knew that the fight would not be easy, not quick, but he also knew that he had taken an irreversible step. That situation, which began as a simple mistake on the boarding port, had triggered a series of reactions that now are out of control. As soon as it is at its corporate headquarters, the pressure has increased. The airline had several boardings. I will send emissaries to Samuel, apologizing, offering financial compensation, and proposing solutions to restore trust. But Samuel did not dish or seduce. He already knew what these companies are trying to do. Use money as a way to silence the problem, to hide the preconceit on the mat. It's not about money, Samuel said in one of the many connections with the company's executives. It's about reconfirming that industry structures are built on inequality. I'm not here to find a temporary solution. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm asking for things to change. Samuel's tone was clear and authoritative, but also filled with a sincerity that was difficult to ignore. He wasn't just doing it for himself, but for all the others who had been marginalized for 2 years, and his words begin to be heard by those whom you are now comfortable with. But we were all ready to hear. Samuel's next step was more strategic. He did not just cancel his partnership with the airline. It began to create a coalition of companies willing to adopt a more inclusive and ethical approach in their businesses. Together with his legal team, he began to reissue new agreements, with clauses that required diversified representation in the upper echelons of companies as he works. He was creating something greater, a network of influence that was not based solely on contracts and profits, but on values of respect and justice. The pressure on the airline increased, under pressure from investors, now also by other influential businessmen who followed Samuel's example. The company began to give up. And, by giving in, she was forced to look inside. As investigations begin to emerge, with details on how racial discrimination is still rooted in the company's processes, from customer service to strategic decision-making. Backstage, Samuel was already starting to see his first victories. Soon, more companies joined Samuel's movement, creating a corporate front that directly challenged the status quo. Demands for diversity and equity will begin to be not just oils, but incorporated into business strategies. The transformation was not instantaneous, but it was real. And Samuel knew that the most difficult thing was yet to come. He had taken the first step, but the road would be long. He would continue to be challenged, to face resistance, to deal with the difficulties of being an exception, not to top of a business world still dominated by an elitist and predominantly white system. But at the same time, he had shown something that few had seen before, that the consequences of not positioning oneself would be much greater than the risk of losing privileges. He had proven that true leadership was not limited to numbers and economic power. It was based on the courage to do something certain, even when the system was against you. As Samuel's movement grew, other stories began to emerge. Other leaders began to rise up, challenging the norms, demanding change, and finally feeling capable of fighting with their own voices, like Samuel Fizera. He who was previously just a CEO was now seen as the emblem of a new generation of leaders, willing to break the barriers that still segregate society. The immediate impact ends. Do not check that a new front line has been established. The airline, pressured from all sides, ended up being forced to reformulate its internal structure. New CEOs, with a more inclusive vision, begin to assume and change the customer service policies implemented. Samuel's case was not just a crisis for the airline, but a turning point for the sector. When Samuel was questioned about his motivation for taking such a drastic attitude, he did not hesitate. "It's not about me. It's about all the others who have endured injustices like that for years. I decided to fight because I was no more willing to oil that my life was reduced to a simple formality of racism." CEO Olopela Hanela of his new headquarters, where the horizon was clearer. These nights of anxiety and uncertainty have already passed. He now knew that a battle, even though arduous, has a broader purpose. The system could be huge, but it was not invincible. He, Samuel Westbrook, now knew that true leadership is never lost in the face of injustice.